How we see the world and how we decide to engage with others is paramount to our success with family relationships, friends, and colleagues. It is also relevant to our desire to support compassionate care with others in the community and globally. Currently living in a tiny rural community on Cape Breton Island, which is known as Unama'ki and is home to the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet people, my life has transformed from the hustle and bustle I once knew living in southern Alberta. I was in Cochrane, to be exact, where a small town became a bustling sleeper community to the metropolis of Calgary. The big amenities, the animosity that can happen when you no longer know your neighbors or the shopkeepers. At the start of my business, which is all the way back in 1988, and some people might not remember writing checks, but I could write a check at the grocery store and I never had to give ID because they always knew who I was and they knew where they could find me. Years later, I now can slip in and out of Cochrane and no one knows I've been there and no one knows who I visited. In Mabu, where I currently reside, we wave at each other when we pass on the road. We attend weddings, wakes, funerals. We support families and friends by these community gatherings. And it's a different way of life, yet it is still a part of that landscape we know as Canada. My guest today has an interesting story to reveal. Growing up in a small town sparked Rachel's curiosity and desire to immerse herself in opportunities that open up an understanding of the different ways people see the world. After graduating with an undergraduate degree in international relations, she dove into the world of nonprofits, only to be greeted by a persistent tug towards the world of education. She pursued a master's degree in the arts of teaching and worked in school districts with vastly different cultures. Having worked in both charter and public schools, she began to notice the gaps that the education system failed to address in each community. Her desire to do more fueled her to leave the classroom, not fully understanding what was going to come next. And the next 2 years, she dedicated herself to reflection and pursuing a personal goal of speaking Spanish. She moved with her husband and 2 young children to Costa Rica for a full immersion experience. A beautiful country full of beautiful people, very different challenges, and it was there that she realized she had a connection thread in her experience. This is in quotes. Many of us have a strong desire to help, yet aren't taking into consideration the specific values and challenges that each community faces, whether they're neighboring cities or different countries. We think we have the answers from the outside, but becoming rooted on the inside reveals a very different perspective. That's the end of the quote. This fueled her desire to become a solution strategist, but with a different angle. Rachel now resides in Washington, D.C., and works with organizations and individuals to unveil solutions using the deep knowledge of the recipients of the help and local community involved. Still very passionate about understanding different perspectives, she enjoys getting to know the truths that each community holds. Hold on to your hats. This conversation will have you thinking differently about how you're going to approach your role in the community and your investment in making relationships that are strong and vibrant for the well-being of more than just your immediate circle. You're listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, sponsored by the Cape Breton Tea Company and Dance Debut Inc. And I'm very pleased to welcome a wonderful friend, Rachael Osorio, and this is Creating a Bridge of Transformation. Hello, Rachel.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Michelle.
I didn't mention in there that, we came together because of a compassionate outreach that we were doing at the time. And it was such an immediate click and a friendship that developed. And I didn't say that in the first part, but I wanted to bring it forward now because we have had a lot of really great, interesting discussions. And it's always been so enlightening the way that the two of us approach things, but also the way that you think about things and you like to bring things forward. So I wanted to thank you for that part of the friendship.
I appreciate that. And it's completely mutual. I think that life has a funny way of putting people on your path right when you need them. And sometimes you're given the gift of clicking on an even deeper level. And I know that through our conversations and through some of the challenges I was going through at the time, you were that solid person I could lean on and ask for advice. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So let's get our conversation started with our intentions for today. And with season 3, I've shifted it up by adding affirmations that come from the Body and Biofield deck that I created as part of the pandemic. And it can be found in the shop at dancedebut.com for those who might want to have a deck of their own. So I've chosen the card today from Meeting the Divine. So for those that are listening, I'm just going to describe. I'm going to hold up the cover of the card deck, which is black, and it has this amazing image on the front that Tanya Levy made. And it's actually of mother and child is how she describes it, but it's a ribbon of color. And I'm bringing that just because the intention that's in there. But the part that I pulled for today comes from Meeting the Divine. So people who are listening, this one has the colors of yellow, green, red, blue, purple, white. It's kind of a modeled kind of thing. And these are all photographs of nature that have been run through filters. And the affirmation, this relates to the 11th chakra of the left foot. So left foot is how energy comes into us and feeds us. And so as we step forward into our future, all you need will be provided. Movement is medicine and the path is clear. So I invite people to think about how they are moving as they want to go forward on their path. And as you and I unfold in conversation today, that'll give them the opportunity to think about what is their step forward, what is their left foot doing, bringing the energy in and supporting them. Okay, so we have that part, but then it's so lovely to energize that with a cup of tea. What have you got today, Rachel?
So I have a mug that my grandmother gifted me right before I moved out of my parents' house. And in that, I have a licorice tea, which I didn't realize the healing properties of licorice until recently. Before I just thought it was, it's this flavor that definitely has a presence. But I was pleasantly surprised. So I'm here with my licorice tea.
Beautiful. And what kind of a color does it have? Because I think you have yours is like clear. Is that right?
Yeah, it's clear. So it is kind of like a yellow goldish color, which reminds me of the sun, to be quite honest. It's a nice reminder.
And the reason I asked you that question is because mine has the same color.
Okay.
And I was thinking, there's a theme going on.
Yes.
So this comes from the Cape Breton Tea Company's Tea with Intention series. And this is Symphony of the Earth. So I don't have licorice in it, but I have orange, lemongrass, peppermint, hibiscus, ginger, and this one's made with rooibos. So we have the essences of those herbs, and as we're drinking, just like you said, there's a quality that comes with licorice. There's a reason for it, and all of the herbs have this essence, this way of talking to us. And so by adding a cup of tea while you're listening to the podcast or adding a cup of tea before you start into a project, you're bringing the support of those herbs into you, and it gives you that opportunity to add a little bit more and maybe some insights you wouldn't have had otherwise. So with that, I've got mine in my dance debut mug, which has transformed from teaching regular dance class to helping people with their bodies and moving more. So Rachel, here's cheers to you.
Cheers.
Okay, awesome. So let's dive into what transpired to provide you with the incentive to shift from the education world and supporting people into really hearing and understanding others. And I know it's not an easy change for people to make, and a lot of times people don't have the courage to step forward that way. And they may sit for many years before they do make a change, and some may never change. They'll just stay where they are because it's easier. So what is it that was within you that allowed you to say, I have to do this change?
Yeah, that happened about 3 to 4 years ago. And it's interesting. I've always had this intuition, this gut feeling when I noticed that a chapter is starting to close. I wasn't expecting it to hit 5 years into my new profession that I had gone to school to learn more about and that I was really eager to dive into. A lot of people find their place, and then it's very easy to walk the path because there's clear markers on what comes next. And so when I started to feel that this chapter was going to come to a close, the feeling became stronger and stronger as the year was going on. And to tell you the truth, it was too loud to ignore, and very, very unsettling, not knowing what was going to come next. So to me, my motivating factor was I can't keep going through my day-to-days not being able to give fully when I have this feeling that is getting stronger and louder within me, and then also look at all these beautiful faces in front of me and hear the voice that is pulling me towards a different path, and not be able to give fully what I could. So it was more of an acknowledgement of the chapter that I had, and kind of an acceptance of a new adventure that was going to lie ahead. And that was one of the biggest ways that I could leave, was understanding that life is full of surprises. And just because I might not know what the next step is doesn't mean that it's going to be something that can't give me that fulfilling feeling. It took a while to get to, but but it was worth it. It was worth leaving the classroom and walking out and being able to walk into a different space.
Mm-hmm. And I should, when I'm talking to people about their transformation, usually we're talking about what power has to happen with inside. But I'm thinking about, too, we have the network of support, because you have a husband that was there to support you, and a family that also was there to support you in that kind of decision-making process. And I know for parents, after they've had their children go through university to get that really good job, I'm sure it was hard for your parents, too, to think about how you're going to transform that, although they knew you were very capable. Do you want to talk a little bit about your support system?
Oh, of course. Yeah, you're totally right. It is a privilege to be able to have the support and the space and the cheerleaders on your side whenever you are embarking on a new journey. And sometimes people are going on their journey alone, which is another set of challenges that lie ahead. But when I think about these feelings that I have, and when I think about how much of my life has been very full of surprises, and I haven't walked a traditional path. I think my parents and my support group, my husband, it's no surprise now whenever I start to express these things. And my belief is that it all comes together in the end, and that our previous experiences are not forgotten, or they're not just a waste of time. They give us skills, opportunities. They give us an ability to move forward in different ways. But when this first became the way that I started to approach life, I was met with a lot of resistance and a lot of questions, which it didn't feel good, but I realized that they were coming from a really good place, and they were coming from a place of wanting me to think through all different angles. And now I've adopted that mindset too. I can't just make choices that feel good in the moment, because ultimately, if there's not that thought process that you walk through in order to plan, they sometimes don't work out very well. But yeah, my support system has I've been gifted with different ways of approaching these changes, and people have different ways of thinking through things. And so I think there's a gift in hearing people question you or bring you different perspectives. And that's what I've been gifted in these moments of transformation.
Beautiful. I wanted to talk a little bit about the classroom, of what you were observing in the differences, the way the kids were responding, and what you were noticing about the different cultures or the different thought patterns. Do you want to talk a little bit about that classroom experience?
Yeah. So this was before COVID. I finished teaching at the end of 2020, the 2020 school year, which was the beginning of that transition into what the COVID norm of education was. So, goodness, Michelle, if you ever want a renewed sense of humanity and just a restored faith, just stand in front of 25 little people, and they have such an incredible way of viewing the world. They have this deepened connection with everything that they interact with. There's a presence that exists that we forget about, and just a zest for life that we forget about. And one thing that I noticed, I worked in different school systems, but the schools that I worked in had homogenous populations, even though they were neighboring cities. And so each school had very different values in place because their parents came from different walks of life. They came from different countries. They came with different challenges. They came with different values, and nothing translated in the way that you would think it would. But at the end of the day, everybody just wanted what was best for their children, and people are doing the best that they can. You might look at a situation and see it with a judgmental eye because we're human, and that's what happens. But you ultimately see that people are doing the best that they can with what they have and what they know, and these are their little lives that they're trying to give the world to. And you see that come through when you have these little people who are 8, 9, 10 years old, and they're just approaching life for the first time, or they're hearing about the struggles in life for the first time. And it's just a beautiful experience to be able to have. And as an adult, I feel that a lot of times we forget the beauty of childhood because it's so far away from us. And so seeing it right in front of you just gives you a very different sense of what life is. Mm-hmm. So it was a gift.
I feel like that when I'm in front of the kids teaching dance, and the opportunity that they may have had for movement patterns and the opportunities they may not have had. And there's definitely a difference. There was already a difference before the pandemic, but there's definitely a difference since. But then watching their eyes light up with a piece of music and a way that they discover they can move, that they didn't realize was there. It's always so much fun to see that spark of excitement about living. And you're right.
Yes.
Sometimes that gets lost on our adult lives and our responsibilities and the things that bring us. So how about with the staff that you worked with and the parents? Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah. There's a lot that's happening in the education system right now when we think about staff and we think about administration and we think about parents. And to put it simply, what I think it comes down to is that there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of trust that has been developed. It's not just we blindly put our trust into somebody's hands, because understanding now as a parent what it's like to have a child, and when you want the best for them and you want to make sure they're safe and happy and thriving, it's sometimes very hard to trust who that person may be without those opportunities to form those relationships. And I think it's the same way in the school systems as well among staff, is we don't facilitate opportunities to build that trust within each other. And so there's a lot of gaps when it comes to understanding the opposite party, whether that is a parent or whether that's the teacher or whether that's the principal, etc., because the relationship hasn't been built. And if the relationship isn't built and you don't know what each side is valuing or what each side is fearful of or what side is interpreting how your actions are being interpreted, it creates a gap that widens and continues to stretch. And if something negative happens or you see your child hurting, our first sense is we need to make sure that they're okay, as it should be. And when you go to approach the person who spends the most time with your child during the day, and you don't know what's happening from that on the other side, it can be really difficult when emotions are heightened to then develop trust in that moment, because you just want to make sure that your kid is okay. Or you just, even in the moments when they're not, it might not be something that I guess, I don't want to say negative, but those can be negative moments. It's just our opportunities to develop relationships and trust have faded, and especially with COVID, rightfully so, as we had to distance and we weren't having gatherings. I think it just made the gap deeper and wider. And as we see our education systems and the way that things are kind of crumbling, these old systems, and I have a lot of thoughts around those that as well, but these old systems are starting to fade out, and we're seeing a lot of different gaps between all of the different parties involved. And I think that we all want what's best for our children, and people who get into this field, typically the majority have a huge heart and desire to give. And you see that, but you also see the withering away of the hope with all of these really difficult situations that continue to occur.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've observed, you've been participating, and then you go, how can I help? Because that's you, that's Rachel. How can I help? So tell me what it is that brought you to the idea of being a solutions strategist. How do you know where to start?
That took 3 years of analyzing my thoughts and my I guess my deep beliefs in what humanity was. And I had a wonderful friend and mentor, Heather Lawrence, who stepped into my life at that time, and she just asked me questions. She is somebody who does a lot of service-oriented work and has been in communities where she's witnessed different types of help being interpreted in different ways from the recipients of the help. And so she and we clicked right when we met. She was my first Spanish teacher, and we just dove into topics that when I left those sessions, I was like, I don't know what I believe in anymore. Like, everything that I've defined as what is helpful and what isn't is completely out the window. And diving into your own thoughts and beliefs and realizing that you missed the boat and that you have to undo and learn something new is it's a lesson that is really just, you feel really raw, and you feel like, I don't know where I stand in this world, because there's a lot of, in my heart, there's a strong desire to contribute positively. But when I started to realize through these conversations and looking around and then just being present in different communities, that some of my actions were not helpful, was a very, it wasn't a good feeling. And my problem that I self-identified, I don't want to call it a problem. My way of thought was that I held the answers and that I knew what was best because of what I was studying and what I had learned and what I had seen. And that if I could just get in there, I could be the change and I could be part of this, and like fueled up big heart, but really missed the mark there, because that is not the approach. When I think about where to begin and how being a solution strategist is what I've decided to embark upon, I think about the first step is building trust and building relationships. It's not about me having the answers, because I am not the one who is living whatever the challenge may be or dealing with whatever that challenge may be. But in the same, we can support each other. And there's a process to supporting each other that reveals solutions that are already there. Sometimes it just takes an outside perspective to ask the right questions and to maybe even bring into awareness that other people need to be gathered together, and hearing deeply what people have to say past the initial conversations that allow these solutions to come forward, which blew my mind when I started to see this in action. But it really is beautiful and humbling, and it creates a change that has so much momentum and so much influence and so much commitment. And those are the changes that last.
And that's key, right? Those are the changes that last.
Yeah.
So you're not just making choices, making changes, kind of wandering along, but you actually have a place that brings you to not an end point, but at least a place that's solid to move again. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. I had a couple different thoughts. One was when you said this all happened in Spanish class, and I was like, wow. So you sign up for a class to learn how to speak Spanish, and instead you end up with a life transformation by the conversation that you're having in a language you can't even speak. That is amazing.
Those are the wild surprises that life gifts you. Yeah, very unexpected.
And I was if I equate that back to dance and my passion for foot percussion, so tap dancing or step dancing, that's the way that I use for foot percussion. But the feet transform so much, and so I hadn't even thought of, just in the context of what you just said. So people come to take a step dance class from me or a tap class, and because of the way that I use intention and I understand goals and moving forward, in that conversation with our feet, we have the potential to do that same kind of transformation. Somebody just signed up because they felt like they'd like to move to some music and it sounded like something interesting. So it's really interesting what happens when you venture out to just take a hobby kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, really interesting. All right, so after you started into the Spanish, you ended up with the opportunity to move to Costa Rica. So I'm curious then, what, you were having this epiphany of the ways that you could be thinking of the world, and so you root the family up and off you go to Costa Rica. Do you want to talk about that little piece of transformation? Because for those people that maybe have never left the area where they were born, what is that like to just go to a new culture and discover more about yourself there?
So I am I love adventures. I love doing it with people, and I love seeing there's just so many surprises that come that you could never anticipate. And there, in those surprises, you start to realize different parts of yourself that would have never had an opportunity to come through. And I think that when we're going through life, there are chapters that are more quiet, and there are chapters that are more alive, and there are chapters that are sad or hard or full of challenges. And each one has their moment. And I think each one has their lessons that you can take from them. In this case, this was a bucket list item that I had talked about for a long time. And my husband wasn't on board with it for like the first 4 years that I talked about it. And it would often I don't know why I would always bring it up on car rides. And then there was no place to like leave after these conversations became more like just like heated. He's like, this is not going to work. And I was like, yes. But going to a new place is one of the most, it gives you some of the most heightened senses and experiences because everything is new. And how often do you get to step into a new situation where everything is just being taken in a way that is new and is different and is not what you expected? You see how big the world is, and you also see that at the end of the day, humans are just being humans in different places. And there's different ways that we live, but ultimately what fuels us and what gives us the sense of being and purpose exists in all different places. And in many cases, they overlap. And it makes the world feel small. And it makes you feel that you are part of something that is bigger, but also that people aren't as different as we think they are. In a climate that is now very polarizing, it's creating those new relationships with people who are not like you, who have different languages, who have been living in a different area, who have dealt with different types of challenges. When you're sharing a meal with those people, or you're talking on the outside waiting for your kids to come back from school, you see that we're very similar, and that these polarizing beliefs that we are very easily taking in just kind of dissipate. And that sense of neighbor is there, which is something that is so beautiful and so rare, sadly. But it gives you this different sense of support. And it's done in a way that is just, it makes sense why we need people in our lives. And so moving to Costa Rica, the days were different, but also very similar. And seeing new places and seeing new nature, and the way that the rain hits the roof, and hearing different animals and seeing different flowers, it creates very strong and alive memories that I think is such a gift to be able to experience. And those things do exist for people who might not have such vast differences in where they live, but they sit differently in your memories. And so we have some very strong memories, challenging, and it wasn't a vacation. People hear Costa Rica, they think that I went on vacation, and I'm like, it was the opposite. I had a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old at the time. So the exact same challenges existed over there as they do over here, but in a beautiful place. I'm not downplaying that beautiful, beautiful place. So vacation atmosphere with real life happening day to day.
And that's what Cape Breton is for me too, because we vacationed here and then we
Mhm.
moved here. And then there are
Mhm.
many days where work is more than everybody else has gone to the beach, and we are still in the office trying to get things done. You can't just drop
Mhm.
it all and go to the beach. Sometimes you can, and sometimes it's
Right.
nice to be 5 minutes from it and know that
Mhm.
you can go and spend 30 minutes and you have the opportunity that many people save for a vacation for.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Mm.
it still has its working life piece in
Right.
there.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's pull the conversation around to the solution strategist piece, because I'm really
Mhm.
curious how people would know to seek your assistance. So
Mm.
what kinds of people could benefit from having the skills that you're able to provide?
So what I usually say is that if you're having this feeling of I am stuck, I just feel stuck. And this happens in individuals, it happens in organizations, it happens in businesses, of either efforts not working out the way that they were anticipated, or just this feeling of not knowing where to go and how to take the next step. It's very broad. That's a very broad way of saying who's coming to me. But there's this reoccurring sense of challenge, I think, that happens to present itself over and over. And oftentimes it's very easy to find an expert and to pay a lot of money and to have these different strategies come in, which in every case is its own case, and every there are different answers to different challenges. But sometimes what I've heard is that there's a lot of discontent, because how do you carry it on after they leave, or how do you carry it on after they came in to solve that problem, and what happens when that problem comes up in a different light, or what happens when the next challenge arises. I think the beauty in this approach is that it can be replicated without me coming back. It can be replicated in all different types of situations. And when I say it's the ability to gather people, the people who are involved, the people who are um, involved on different levels, and hearing their perspective and taking it just as much with just as much value as an expert coming in. And the doors that open when you start to take in different perspectives are just incredible. What's really challenging about that is hearing what somebody else might have to say, and being prepared to hear that the efforts that were put forth aren't working or being interpreted in the way that they were intentionally set out um, to accomplish. And that can be really piercing. So there's an element of having to step outside of yourself, and that's when having somebody else come in to take in that information with you can be very helpful, because a lot of times our emotions become very loud and it's hard to step outside of that moment. um, but these we have these communities built around us, and in those communities we have so many answers that are just waiting to be heard. And so that reoccurring sense of challenge or feeling stuck, the answer might not be too far away. And it's just coming in and facilitating an environment where it can appear, that tends to be to give that aha moment and to give that opening that may not have occurred just staying within yourself or within your team and keeping the conversation there.
Wow. Wow. Could you, because I'm thinking with my head the two parts, right? Because there's the part of the person who's stuck, but then there's also the part of an organization or business that's stuck. Could you talk a little bit about maybe a transformational kind of experience that an organization might experience?
Yeah. So there's different types. There are miscommunications that occur within teams that keep an effort from fulfilling and going through and being carried out in a helpful way. And when I think about that, I think about there are different types of listeners. And so if we don't realize that people are taking in different information or taking in the same information in different ways, that they're created is a gap between the members. And there's a way, when we understand how people are taking it in and hearing, that we can use their strengths to then come together and put a project forward. And so many people, we have a very misinterpreted idea of what listening is, and that is all being, there's a lot of research that's coming out right now that says that there are no good listeners or bad listeners. There's just different types of listening. And so if you can see what each person's strength is, then you can pull that gift that they have from and put that into the team, and you know that that's going to be how they can support. So bringing that team together and being more cohesive is one way that you can start to build that bridge over that gap. And in organizations too, there's in my experience, when there is that feeling of, I'm not accomplishing what I am setting out. I'm not doing, I don't want to say not doing, but I'm not accomplishing the mission, or there must be a better way to go about this. I recently worked with an organization where we worked together to reveal that her niche was in a different place, still in the same category, but she just had to pivot a little bit. And with that pivot, it took months in order to get to this place. And sometimes, what is time? It depends on what you're trying to work towards. But that pivot opened up so many doors, so many opportunities, and it took a lot. She had to rebrand in some ways. She had to go back through her content. She had to think from a different angle. And it was through us talking together and working together that we saw the solution coming through from her. It's just, this process is beautiful. And I don't think someone coming in from the outside in this situation and saying, like, this is what you need to do, there's a lot of questions and hesitation, especially when trust isn't built, when there's money that's being exchanged for these answers, that you feel like you have to buy into it because you're spending money on this person who's coming in and saying this. And so like that deep investment, unless you really click with it really quickly, there might be hesitation, and it might not have the same energy as it is when it's coming through the person who is trying to, in some cases, unstick themselves, in some places go through that challenge, go through a different door. It's fascinating how this can transfer in different ways. And it's a really cool thing to witness, because At the same time, I'm going to be very honest, there's a lot of internal dialogue that I have to silence because I think that I know best in some cases. And it's just human to have to be like, no, like Rachel, this is not about you. This is not like turn off this other voice that is trying to participate in the conversation with the answers and listen. And so that is what I find again and again to be the key to unlocking those aha moments.
It's interesting you say that, because if you were to go to talk to a family member or a friend to have a similar kind of conversation to unstick yourself, they would have the input. And then you go to 5 or 6 friends and they all have different input. And what happens is you voiced everything, but now you have more confusion because you have all these opinions that came back and you still don't know where you're going. So what you're saying is you have the capability then for them to sort that, sort the static out that's surrounding everything, and to be able to hone in on the true message. That's really powerful. Yeah.
And it's a taught skill, so it can transfer once you, like, it takes a lot of undoing and sometimes learning in different ways, but it transfers into different aspects of life. And again, because life has, lots of challenges, but it's a skill that can be used again and again and again. And I don't have to be present for that. It's just, which is the beauty, that self-sustaining gift at the end of the day, where it can just be used in many different situations.
Wow. Okay, so you have the ability to sit back, listen, and not provide opinion or judgment for people talking to you. Now, how do you apply that into your personal life? I'm curious, because I know you're not going to be sitting in this one place. You're thinking and you're watching and observing the world and knowing where your hand could be most helpful. So how do you use those strategies for yourself? What's the Rachel sauce in there?
It's always easier when it's not you. And to be honest, this process evolved from at the beginning when I was starting out and I was trying to figure out what is the identity of the Bridge to Innovative Solutions. What am I doing? And like, what is it? I was spinning and I felt like I was spinning in darkness. And my entire day was just filled kind of like climbing the walls within these thoughts, trying to figure out what is it? What am I supposed to do here? Like, how do I transfer this to the outside world? And I wasn't using it myself. I wasn't taking a step back out of myself. And that took a long time to do. And it wasn't until I had a health issue that kind of scared me into stopping these thoughts and start to look at my life, that I took 3 steps back and I was like, there's so much beauty around me. There's so much that when I'm not spinning, I start to see. And I never wish a health scare onto anybody, but in my case, everything's fine. But in the moments when you don't know if things are fine, your brain just goes to the worst case. And I was like, all right, I can sit in the worst case scenario. Now I'm clearly out of my spinning, like, what is my identity, like, track? And I'm looking at my life and I had to reshift. I zoomed out because I was not going to zoom into those thoughts. And I just started looking at these tiny moments and these moments of beauty and these interactions with people. And I mean, amazingly, as I took 3 steps back and started to look in, I created a space where other thoughts started to also, and ideas started to flow in. And I was like, oh, well, there we go. But it just, sometimes we perpetuate the same problem and the same challenge when we are obsessive about it, and it doesn't get us anywhere. And we start to we try to brainstorm within ourselves or within our small network, and doesn't get us anywhere. And so it's that zoom out. And so being a solution strategist and bringing in other people, you create this bigger lens, this zooming out, because you're bringing in other perspectives. And so in my case, I transferred it, definitely a micro level experience, but it's just when we obsess over these thoughts and try to get to the truth or try to figure them out, oftentimes we don't create space for those aha moments to occur. And that was my biggest takeaway from those experiences. I actively had a firsthand experience as to what I'm trying to help others with and assist others in their missions and goals and everything they're setting forth. I got to experience myself in this way. And so in a way, I was able to shine light on just the challenges that arise when we start to want an answer really badly. It doesn't always work.
So what could you offer to people today listening that are on the cusp of, they could make a transformation, haven't been quite courageous enough yet to, take that left step forward? We have a right foot and a left foot, but since the left foot is what showed up today for intention, for the power and the energy to be able to come through, what could you offer people about the decisions they might be able to be sitting with?
Yeah. So I thought a lot about this question, and then I realized that's the problem. Is thinking is a tool that is incredibly powerful for planning, for taking in other potential ways that it can play out. But thinking can also be a really big trap that keeps us in our place. We get caught in thoughts of what will others think about this? What if it doesn't work out? What if? And we don't even consider the beauty that can come in these changes, because it's very easy to get stuck in the rest, which, those are all potential ways that it can play out. But there's also, I just come back to this over and over, there are so many surprises that life has, and not negative ones, just beautiful surprises that can't happen unless you move forward. And so it's just, when you've done the planning, when you've done the thinking, just silencing that and telling it, okay, I appreciate all of this. And now you gotta you might have to will yourself to move, but taking that step forward and just being open to it's not going to play out how you think. It's not because there are so many other factors in life, but that doesn't mean that it won't be better than what you thought. And so I think that it comes down to knowing when it's time to silence the thoughts and take that step forward. And the thoughts might be saying, it's not time, it's not time, it's not time. And if you are having those thoughts, I think then it's time. So there's so many cool things that come from changes.
Oh, I love what you said there. That's so great. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I know we could talk more, and we could do some diving into some ways of really thinking differently. But if we've got people at least thinking about a transformation, about moving forward, that there are people like you who are ready to help them find the door and to find the door that they wish to go through. How can people find you?
Yes. Oh, I'm very easy to find, and I'm excited to talk to everybody who crosses my path. I am on LinkedIn, and I also, through email, through phone calls, I am here. I live in DC, and my way of getting to know people is always through in person first, if it's possible, and if not, through a video call, because there's just so much that you can exchange through seeing the other person. So that's my preferred method. But yeah, email or LinkedIn, I am connected and excited to meet whoever crosses my path.
So, Rachael Osorio on LinkedIn. And what's your email?
It is rosorio at bridge to innovative solutions dc.com. I don't think that's right. Let me go. Let me pause on that one.
While you're looking for that, which is it's going to be in the description anyway, so we'll have the correct piece there. I would like to close with some kind of movement activity that the family could enjoy or others could be inspired by. And I think we've kind of touched on a couple movement things already. And you talked about that stepping forward piece. So is there a favorite movement activity that you like to do that kind of moves you from one point to the next or transfers your thoughts?
Yes. So this is going to sound really basic, but having young kids and seeing them use their arms, stretching all the way out or up, I started to mimic that. And I realized how much of my body just stays really centered and how foreign it felt to lift my arms up above my head or outstretched all the way. I was like, this doesn't feel natural. But when you look at kids, it's literally all they do is like everything is huge and expressive. And so I started to stretch like that and started to open up my arms and started to just like reach as high as I can. And sometimes even doing that, I feel like I've just opened myself up in a way that is much more just fulfilling, just to reach out and use those muscles in that way. So I've learned from them, and yeah, it's just moving your arms above your head and out as far as they can go in all different directions. It feels very empowering.
From a brain perspective, they refer to that as the star. So the primary reflexes, the very first things we're doing as babies is trying to find where we are in space. And we do that in that expansion and then contraction. That's how we know where we are. So that's instinctually, kids already know to do that. And then we have this lovely training that puts us in front of a computer or with a handset playing a game or something where everything comes into this focused forward piece. So that opportunity to expand and be bigger opens up what the brain is capable to see and look at. So you described some of that already. And that movement pattern actually provides the impetus for you to even make that kind of shift. So thanks for that one. and what I would add to that is if it's hard for you to step from where you are not moving so much and being constricted, then put on a favorite piece of music. Maybe you want to hum a tune. Maybe you want to tap something with your feet, and it could be as simple as just tap the beat, but start to bring the beat in. And then as you start to move those small micro movements, the bigger movements become easier. So the stretch that you're talking about, if you haven't done that for a long time, that feels really weird to be that big. But if you start with a piece of music, the body starts to move, and pretty soon you have that expansion, and your thought process can have that expansion as well. So, yeah. Do you want to try your website one more time?
Yes. So, so my email is rosorio, Osorio at bridge2solutionsdc.com.
There we go. You did say it right.
That one, I get that. There's a way of communicating, I promise.
Oh, that's beautiful. All right. So let's bring this conversation to a close. And I know you and I are going to have more. We have lots still we have yet to discuss. So but for today, this is a great way for us to look at that transformation process and start thinking about, for the people that were listening, how can you bridge from where you are to where you want to go? And who has the tools and the capabilities to get you there? And if the people in your circle of influence have not been supporting you, then know that there are solution strategists available, and that Rachel's ready to speak about whatever you want to talk about to help you find that clarity of the moments and where you want to be. So thank you, Rachel, so much for the conversation and sharing your story. It's so lovely.
Thank you, Michelle. Such an honor.
So in closing, this is season 3, and we're devoted to the transformational process that happens when people reach into their authentic selves and decide to create magic. Our season has several publications this year, and we hope that they inspire and empower you to consider living your true heart's desire with the love and compassion for others at the forefront. Thank you for joining us. This is Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, and I'm wishing you well-being. Take care.